When we think of street food, most of us will likely imagine dishes like Thailand's pad thai, Vietnam's banh mi, or even New York City's $1 pizza. These are all foods that are either sold or meant to be enjoyed on the streets. But when it comes to Singaporean street food, or what is more commonly known as hawker food, instead of pushcarts or stalls lining the street side, we get dishes served in sheltered complexes furnished with fans and permanent seats. Considering that the word hawker literally means someone who travels around to sell their wares, it begs the question, why aren't our nation's street food being sold or consumed on the streets? Hi, I'm Joshua Lim, and this is the Library Report, where we examine the books we read, engage the people we meet, and investigate the places we've seen. In this episode, join me as I explore the history and stories behind Singapore's hawker and culinary scene. For a country whose favourite pastime is eating, the hawker centre can be considered a national treasure here in Singapore. So much so that hawker culture attained UNESCO status in 2020. However, while our hawker dishes have gained a formidable reputation as being one of the best, no-frills and affordable delicacy options out there, they don't exactly fit the description of street food. So what are the stories behind our hawker dishes that have made them known as our nation's street food? To answer this question, we have to go back to the beginnings of our hawker culture from the 19th to mid-20th century, where hawkers, who were mostly immigrants, literally travelled around selling comfort foods from their own home countries. It was a popular trade amongst the unemployed because it required little capital to start. Regular customers included labourers, clerks, and city dwellers who did not cook in their quarters. Chinese hawkers typically sold coffee, fresh produce, and cooked foods, while Malay and Javanese hawkers generally clustered around lanes that sold fruits and satay. Indian hawkers delighted their customers with colourful sweets, jellies, and cakes. It was a completely different scene from today. And I can't help but wonder, how did our present-day hawkers come about? To further my research, I am going to consult Gayatri from the National Archives of Singapore, who will guide me to resources that chronicle the transformation of our hawker culture. Hi Gayat, thanks for meeting me. It's nice to meet you.
Hi Joshua, it's nice to meet you as well.
So what do you do at the National Archives?
At the National Archives, I'm with the Archives Reading Room. This is where members of public visit us when they need to get information for their research topics using the archival materials that we may have for them.
Alright, so if people want to do research and gain access to materials here at the archives, they come to you for help?
Yes, this is where they would come.
Based on the record we saw earlier, the colonial administration recognized hawkers as a necessary evil because their work was essential to their livelihoods, despite them causing some problems like poor hygiene or even obstructing traffic. So in the 1930s, there were 6 dedicated hawker shelters set up that were equipped with piped water that hawkers could rent. And then after the Japanese occupation, when World War II ended, there was a rise in unemployment, and then we saw a resurgence of hawkers again.
Yes, and understanding our hawker food origins will be helpful. Many first-time hawkers took valuable recipes from home and sold them as street food. This is most likely due to financial desperation. This included Wenchang chicken rice, a dish which is for special occasions in Hainanese homes. And today in Singapore, chicken rice is a popular and favourite dish among Singaporeans. Even the Peranakans, who were proud and protective of their cuisine, started hawking recipes and thus introducing Nonya Laksa into the Singapore food scene. If you'd like to find out more about the history and evolution of our hawker culture, perhaps you would like to explore archival materials for your research.
Looking at this record here, it was in 1950 that the authorities realized that the 6 hawker shelters were not enough to house the growing number of hawkers. More needed to be built. As a result, between the 1950s and 60s, as hawker shelters became a common space for street hawkers of different ethnic groups, various cuisines started to borrow from each other. Hawkers innovated and adapted their recipes to attract more customers, thus creating the Singaporean food we know today. It was in 1972 that hawker culture finally got a facelift. Spearheaded by the newly formed Ministry of Environment, a hawker department was set up for licensing, planning and development, and enforcement of hawker centre operations. By 1986, despite initial disagreements to relocate and fights between hawkers and authorities, hawker centres finally evolved into the form we know today. In those years, hawker culture grew from just being tolerated to being well loved. And with globalization, Singapore saw an influx of non-traditional cuisines in the 1980s and 90s. Today, we see a great mix of both traditional and innovative Singaporean dishes being sold. Singapore's street food may be commonly linked to our hawker dishes. But are there any other foods that fit the description of street food that most understand it to be? The answer can be found at our Pasar Malams. Pasar Malam is a Malay term meaning night bazaar or night market. They were first established by hawkers in the mid-1950s near British military bases, selling their food outside the city centre. Now, despite their popularity, the proliferation of these night markets resulted in an increase in noise pollution, public health problems, and traffic congestion, resulting in their closure in 1978. Thankfully, Pasar Malams returned to HDB estates in 1991 as part of the government's effort to boost business and revive older neighbourhoods. Alongside Pasar Malams, travelling stalls like ice cream carts and those peddling roasted chestnuts and the fan favourite Milo truck are also fond nostalgic links to our rich street food history. So, coming back to the question, why aren't our street food sold on the streets? Well, relocating our hawkers off the streets and into proper premises near our housing estates brought about better public health and more land to develop, all the while keeping street food accessible to the masses and protecting the livelihoods of our hawkers. And despite the differences in their setup, hawker centres still share many qualities with street hawking, offering affordable and flavourful food promptly. Street hawking may have started off as a means for survival, but today, hawker centres are the culinary representation of Singapore's melting pot of culture and the intermingling of our different communities. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Library Report. Do give us a like and a comment down below to share your thoughts with us. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe and we'll see you in the next one.